Welcome to another episode of Clinic Success Secrets, a podcast where we uncover the strategies and insights that drive clinic growth and elevate patient care. I'm your host, Tomas O'Dwyer, founder of Clinic Success Partners. We're a medical digital marketing agency dedicated to helping more clinics serve more people. I'm really looking forward to diving in today with the one and only Dr. Chris Phelps. Dr. Chris Phelps is a general dentist, entrepreneur, and author known for his groundbreaking work in dental practice growth and ethical influence, leveraging some of the techniques made famous by the one and only Robert Cialdini. Dr. Chris Phelps is also the CEO of the Cialdini Institute, which is a platform where people learn how to leverage ethical persuasion to leave a bigger impact in the world. That being said, I'm really looking forward to this. Chris, it's a pleasure to have you here today.
Same, my friend. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. It's a pleasure to have a conversation. With that being said, jumping right into it, I know in previous conversations, you are a self-described entrepreneur who just happens to practice dentistry, not a dentist who has a business. Would you mind breaking a bit into how you make that distinction? I know you say certain people have that entrepreneurial, spirit at heart, and just a bit about your journey and why you believe that's the case.
Yeah. So, for me, it all kind of started in seventh grade. So in middle school here in the US, when a buddy of mine had invited me to go to a Future Dentist of America club meeting, a meeting that I had never heard of before that time and have yet to see another one since anywhere else. Yet somehow my friend's mother found out about it, and I guess she didn't like him sitting around the house playing video games with me all the time. So she signed him up to do some extracurricular activities. And he didn't want to go alone, and he asked me if I wanted to go. And I was like, yeah, sure. What am I doing? I'll go with you. And we went to a local dentist office in Greensboro, North Carolina. And the dentist that started this club, I guess his son was about our age. So kind of looking back on it, and of course, his son was the president of the club. So I'm thinking he was kind of building his resume, right, already for college. And but it was just great because this guy took us, this group of kids in, and really mentored us and like showed us a slideshow presentation of how he helps people and before and after smiles. And for me, that was like he did a lot of surgery, so he had all of his surgical instruments kind of laid out on a table nearby, and there was like a light right over him. And they must have been brand new or really clean because they were just shiny. The light was just bouncing off of them. So it kind of caught my attention. I was like, ooh, what's that over there? And so like I kind of moth to a flame. I'm looking at it and he goes, well, these are these little thing called blade implants I put in people's jaws. And he shows me a little picture of it. It looks like an ice skate with a thing you could put a tooth on it. And I was like, you put that in people's mouths? And he was like, yeah. And I don't know, something about that. I had this like overpowering feeling. I was like, yeah, this is what I'm going to do when I grow up, kind of thing. Like, really was fortunate that I committed to something early on, because I think many of the folks I grew up with are still trying to figure out what they want to do when they grow up. So being that focused early on was a blessing for me. So I thought my passion was to always be a dentist. And so that's what I was driven to do: go to dental school, become a dentist, treat my patients. But yet something kept happening, like, my activities, my actions, meaning building other offices and then starting to build other dental companies to support those offices, started pulling me away from the chair. So I had this push-pull conflict, right? So at the time when I had 4 dental practices that I built here in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I was still doing clinical dentistry 5 days a week. I had was doing all the marketing decisions and running the content for those, and running all the business operations decisions for those practices. So doing that with dentistry at the chair 5 days a week was not an easy task. And so I knew even I could balance and juggle multiple things, that even my cup was starting to run over, if that makes sense. So I had to start making some hard changes and look at myself. And I was fortunate that I met a person named Kathy Colby, who does an assessment test by that same name, Kolbe. And I took this test, and I had like 4 little numbers on a name tag. And I was like, hey, Kathy, nice to meet you. I'm Chris. I'm a dentist. And she goes, Chris, nice to meet you, but you're not a dentist. I was like, pretty sure I'm a dentist. I feel like I remember those 4 years of school. I don't think I made that up. And she goes, no, no, what I mean is, and what your numbers tell me, how you're instinctively built, right? So we're not talking about your IQ or your personality, but kind of what kind of car are you, so to speak. She tells me that you're an entrepreneur who's using dentistry as his vehicle. And I was like, ooh, interesting. Okay. She goes, I'd be willing to bet you have another business outside of your four dental practices. And sure enough, I just started my first dental support business. And I was like, guilty. She goes, see, I know what you're going to do and what you're not going to do. Right. So the Colby concept is all about embracing the who you are instinctively, because you may know how to do certain things. You may want to do certain things, but if you're not built to do it, it's not sustainable. So I realized this is why my actions kept pulling me away from the chair, but my personality, right, and my thoughts were always driven to be at the chair. And I knew I had to make a decision. So I decided that to buy back my time and be happier, so to speak, and get back to doing things that I was instinctively built to do. So that's really what set me on that path.
It's fascinating. Even hearing you use the term Colby, we've obviously had a conversation before, and I didn't add two and two because I use the very same litmus, test, personality test when making hires myself, along with DISC and Myers Briggs. So Colby usually is the best indicator. So it's fascinating between the work with Cialdini, which we'll dive into. It it is funny how the impact of the butterfly effect. A conversation, a perchance conversation on your end just really helps you find that alignment with what you said. When push comes to shove, is your default personality, which is that entrepreneurial flame. So I mean, it's inspiring, really. Uh, with that being said, you mentioned before, and I know when you're in dental practice surgery, uh, you know, the traits were always there. But I think even if we roll back before that, when you're in college, I heard, even back then, the cliff notes, a few little side hustles, that was always there as far as I'm aware.
It was. Yeah, that was definitely my first entrepreneurial when it came out of me for the first time, I would say. And it was just by circumstance. And it started organically, naturally. One of the guys in my dental school class came to me for tutoring. And, I didn't know what to tell him. I was like, dude, it's a lot of stuff. Going from 15 hours a semester in college to 40 hours a semester in dental school of content, it's a lot of material you got to get through. And you got to, at this level, you got to know it. But I saw this guy putting in the time and the effort in the library, but he wasn't getting the result. Right. So I kind of felt for
Mm,
him. And I generally wanted to help him because I will help anybody that puts in effort. Right. He didn't have a strength for seeing what was important or being able to simplify the material to what was the most important. So one of my things I did to just my own process was to learn it. I had to invest a lot of time digesting the material to simplify it. So I condensed every test in dental school down to 5 pages of notebook paper front and back. And I just made a copy of those 5 pages and said, "Here, put your time into this." He's
mm,
like, just this? I was like, yeah, that's what I studied. Put your time into this. Now, what he didn't know is, it started with 15 pages, and then I rewrote it, condensed it to 10 pages, and then I rewrote it and I condensed it to 5 pages, which is why it took so much of my time. But they were five pretty detailed pages. Like if you knew that stuff, you knew the core of what any test was going to be. And lo and behold, he went from getting 68 to 72 on every test. First time he used my little 5 pages of notes, he got a 94. I was like,
wow.
hey, congratulations, man. That's phenomenal. He goes, man, this thing was amazing. He goes, do you have the next test? I was like, yeah, dude, I do this for every test. It's my process. So I gave him a copy of the next test and next test, 92. I'm like, and he, generally thanks me again. I'm like, hey, my pleasure. And I know he's going to ask me for another copy. I'm about to go make one for him. And he hands me a check for, $20 and he says, hey, thanks for the tutoring. And then he hands me another 20 and he's like, can I get the next test? And I'm like, oh, sure. Okay. Yeah, this is kind of tutoring. All right. I like this. And then I closed the door of my apartment and told my wife, I was like, honey, you're not gonna believe this. I just made $40 studying. Like, what? That's crazy. Well, flash forward, next thing I know, 2 nights later, one of my other classmates who wanted to go to specialty school was looking for an edge any way he could get it. Comes to my apartment door and he goes, hey, Phelps, I hear you got these notes. And he hands me a 20. He's like, I want a copy. I'm like, okay, cool. Now I'm getting real excited. Well, flash forward, towards, it ultimately ended up, I had about 71 to 74 members of my class on the payroll for, for, for every test. Right. And what was interesting to me about that was, number one, the top 10% of the class hated me because I blew the curve out of the water. There was no
Mm,
curve. Right. So I made them work harder, right, to be at the top 10%. So, but at the same time, they all excelled in their specialty program. So I think I did them a favor, but I don't know if they'll look at it that way. But what was interesting was, I didn't take, Chet was an exception, but I didn't take D students to A students usually, right? Because everybody's only going to put a certain amount of time, effort, and energy in whatever they're trying to do, right? But I just got the best material in front of them for that time they were going to put into it. So I
mm.
got D students to be C students. I got C students to be B students. I got Bs to be As, right? So most people kind of graduated up one level, which was kind of cool. But it taught me a powerful lesson in business and dentistry and the mindset of my colleagues. So,
I love that. I think there's a strong parallel back when I was in university myself doing biomedical engineering. Is a similar idea. I was teaching people mathematics. They're younger students, and at the time, all my classmates. I remember, I think I was charging. I think it was at the time it was a ridiculous amount of money. I think it was 40 euro an hour, and I remember being pulled aside by another classmate. They were like, "You can't be making that because I think the minimum wage is about 8 euro." And I was like,
yeah.
why not? And they said, you just can't. I was like, well, the students, as far as they're concerned, are getting a great deal. The parents love me. And
Mhm.
I think it's a great deal too. So it is very much a case of you dictate the value to the marketplace. And then if the market matches that, then it's fair game for everyone. But to dive into something you touched on there, and I actually think this is an interesting parallel, is that mindset of distilling things back to base principles and how you manage, seeing the work that you've done with dental marketing and influence and the Cialdini Institute and your multiple different businesses is in our previous conversations, what really impressed me was how you could distill, again, what on a surface level may appear to be complex concepts and then tweak them slightly so that they're primed exactly for the type of business that you're looking for. And obviously where I'm going at with this is what point when you're building your dental practices did you feel I need one more competitive edge? And that competitive edge is human behavior. What was there a
Yeah.
catalyst for that? Was that general?
No, it was definitely a catalyst. Like most things, necessity is the mother of invention. I didn't go looking for this, but I'm one of those people that if a problem comes in front of me, like a serious problem, and I tackle it and commit to it, then I have to, like a fact finder 10, dive into it and really understand it. Every detail, every nuance. I got to get to that why, right? Why, what is the root cause behind this thing? And if I can't, then I can't shake it until I figure it out. But once I do, and usually a solution comes out of that that really solves the problem. So for me, it was when I decided going back to that diversification where I was on this path of, do I stay on what I'm doing or do I, simplify my life? That's when I decided to simplify. And I sold my two best, highest producing, lowest debt practices. And I took over the two worst practices. Okay. So highest debt, least producing. One was the original office I started in that had been consistent. It just hadn't grown at all. It was doing, 150,000 every month for maybe 3 or 4 straight years. But one of them I took over was the brand new office that we'd started, and it was costing me 70,000 a month in expense, but only bringing in 35,000 a month in revenue. Well, if you got three other partners and three other offices, that one struggling practice an investment, right? It's going to get
Mm.
there. When you got one partner that came with you in one practice, that's a problem. So
Yeah.
for me, that was the catalyst. I couldn't ignore that problem anymore. And I really had to dig into it and figure out why and look at why. And this, of course, is right during the 2008 housing crisis, right? Where one of the worst times to have an office open. And here we are, trying to succeed when everybody else is tightening up with their money out there because the banks are failing. And it was a very nasty time of uncertainty in the marketplace, very similar to what we kind of see today with inflation and everything else going on. So I see a lot of parallels there. But it forced me to dig into, and thank God somebody just happenstance happened to invite me through a coaching program I was in to come hear Dr. Cialdini speak. I never heard of the guy before that. And I was like, oh, sure. Again, like my buddy, people invite me to places, I tend to go, and good things tend to happen. Right. So never say no to a good opportunity. So I go, and he talks about at the time the 6 principles of persuasion. And instantly I was like, holy crap, man, this dude has got it figured out. He is dialed into, again, that root cause. Like he's really simplified it down to what the majority of people are using to make the majority of their decisions. I mean, how powerful is that, right? So here I've been making strategies around the excuses my patients were giving me in the practices. It's the economy, it's too expensive, my insurance doesn't cover it, what have you. So the strategy there is, well, if it's too expensive, let's just keep discounting it. And well, eventually, let's sign up for every insurance plan, so to speak, right? Until we're basically giving it away like we are today. But instead, I realized, no, we don't have to do that. If you actually make your strategies around the things people are actually using to decide, not the excuses we hear later, huh? I wonder if things could change. Yeah, and boy, did they, right? So I went out to Phoenix, Arizona. I did a 2-day workshop with Dr. Cialdini and his team, left with 1,000 ideas on how to implement those things, and then found out they had a certification program, which I applied to. And since they didn't have anybody in medical and dentistry, they accepted me. And at the time, there was only 8 of us in the world that were certified to speak on his behalf. And right now, there's only 12 of us in the world that can do that as well. So it was kind of a cool little niche that I was in. And I was able to kind of go back and use my training in influence and persuasion and all these behavioral science research studies that we covered and go back and look at that. And I would see parallels. I'd be like, wait, what they did in that study, that's exactly what I'm trying to do to get these reviews, to get these referrals, to get influence patients to say yes to their treatment. Huh. Wait, what they did with teams over here in that study, that's what I'm trying to do with my team. So I can get out of telling them to do stuff and just influence them to do stuff so that when the cat was away, the mice didn't play. So I was able to use those 2 practices as my laboratory for the next 3 years and try to implement as many of these things as possible to try to apply them, right? Let's put these into practice and see what happens. And of course, the results were, did it have an impact? Yeah. Each practice had $1 million worth of revenue increase each 2 years in a row, right? From 2009 to 2010. And so when most practices were tightening up and at a time when dentistry had more practices that went bankrupt than in the history of dentistry in those 2-year periods, here we are rapidly growing in that economy despite it.
That's incredible. And I definitely want to dive deep into those examples. You have your 4A framework, which I'd love to talk about more about. But before we do, you did mention 6 principles of persuasion. I know since then there's been a 7th, and an important concept for anyone listening here, which is the concept of persuasion and obviously pre-suasion. Would you mind distinguishing that and explaining a bit more about that?
Yeah, definitely. So persuasion is all about having influence when a person's interacting with you directly. So they're with you in that moment with you. But believe it or not, one of the research Cialdini did after persuasion was realizing that there's these other factors that can have a huge impact on your ability to persuade when they're with you that happen way before they get to you, right? So that's what this idea of persuasion is. It's all about influencing them into a key mindset, if you will, a mindset that's going to make them more receptive to what you're going to be talking about in person. But you do that before they ever get to you. So we're almost kind of using persuasion before they get to us, and we're calling it persuasion, right? So kind of priming the pump for a yes, if you will. And, I didn't realize how important persuasion is until this came out and we got trained on it. But now I almost feel like if you think about it, it's almost more important than persuasion. I mean, yeah, you got to know how to persuade the person and influence them in this moment. But if you think about it, if they're coming in with a mindset already established into this conversation with you, and that mindset, for the most part, is going to be competing with or distracting them from what you want to talk about, then the door to yes in that moment is already shut. And it is hard, if not impossible, for you to influence that door back open, unless that person has some kind of top of mind pain situation, right? Motivated desire to move forward. Otherwise, for most of the routine things we're going to be talking about in dentistry, I realize, holy crap, it's shut. So yeah, we got to get them. They're all coming in with a mindset, but for the most part, it's not about their mouth. It's
Mm.
something else. And that something else is keeping them from saying yes. So we definitely need to dial in and create some things and tactics to and strategies to get them in that right mindset first. So by the time they get to us, now they're here and present, not somewhere else. And we have a chance to use whatever persuasion principles are present.
I love this so much. And I think for any business owners listening here, I would implore you to try and think where this fits in for your own business, because the second I heard a name for that principle, it made so much sense. Because, for example, for ourselves, if we're getting clients for clinic success partners, you know, if they come in with inbound marketing, we have content out there and they think, wow, you really know your stuff. We've effectively used pre-suasion techniques where they're thinking they've got this parasocial component where they feel like they know you. They feel, right, this is something I'm already keen for. And as you said, instead of trying to reactively trying to close a deal, upsell somebody in the case of a dental clinic or a med spa and so on, you proactively put them in that mindset, and it's much easier for everyone. So I really, really love that. And I'd love to hear more about how you actually implement this for your dental clinics.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously, from a marketing standpoint, you can use the persuasion principles before they get to you in persuasive ways. So, like for instance, I love to put social proof and authority triggers in all of my advertising. So automatically, I'm letting other people, other items, other things present me and my team as the experts, right, with these authority triggers, and at the same time showing them the social proof of numerous photos with me and my patients, right? So individual photos and then stacked together. So you see me with a lot of different patients, or I get my patients together in groups and I take group photos with them. So I like to do little events and whatnot. So putting those kind of photos kind of shows people, wow, look how many people go to that office and are having a great experience. Okay. Well, geez, look at all this training, this expertise. Look at these testimonials people have said. All right. People trust them, and a lot of people trust them. All right, maybe I'll be safe going here and I can trust them as well. So they kind of come in with that mindset of trust and certain that they've made the right decision, right? They're going to have a good experience there. Now, with that in mind, all my team has to do is not screw that up.
I love it. And then again, next, I'd love to talk about your 4A framework and how that interplays with all of this. But just to recap, the persuasion principles themselves, would you mind running through them at a very high level, just so people get a bit of background information?
Yeah, definitely. So you've got reciprocity. Reciprocity basically states that if someone gives you a gift of significance or value to you, that there's an obligation created inside of you that you feel the need to give back and give back in kind. So, in essence, if somebody gives you a gift on your birthday, you're probably going to give them a gift on their birthday. If somebody does you a favor, you're going to feel the need and desire to give them a favor, right? Because of this obligation. So, if you are given something of significance, you feel you have to give back. The liking principle simply states that we like to do business with people we like. We don't like to do business with enemies.
Yeah.
But even not that extreme. I mean, if I don't know you and I don't like you, then I'm more likely than not going to say no to you if you ask me something, right? So we like to do business with people we like, but more specifically, this is where like building rapport and building a relationship with the patient comes into play. It's about connections, right? We like those who are like us, who have similarities, commonalities to us. We like those who like us and tell us or show us that they like us, right? If you're the first to show me that you like me, well, now reciprocity kicks in. I'm probably going to reciprocate and like you back. Okay. So it's not about to get others to like us. It's about us showing them that we like them first. And oftentimes they're going to like us back in return. You've got unity, our newest principle. So that principle, Dr. Cialdini reported on that when the Presuasion book came out a few years back. And because it's an offshoot of reciprocity, right? Is what unity is. And they discovered this when they were doing these studies at McDonald's restaurants in South America, where they would have somebody like a little concierge, if you will, uh, who would stand there in the store and have a balloon. And as kids were leaving the restaurant with their parents, they would randomly give kids balloons, okay, on the way out. Well, one of the ideas one of our trainers came up with was, hey, why don't we leverage reciprocity? Why don't you give them the balloon when they come into the restaurant first and see what happens? And sure enough, they waited, and as kids came into the restaurant, they gave them balloons. And it was a significant increase in the number of children's meals and accessories like desserts and even parent stuff like coffee and other things the parents bought as a result of that one little balloon given to the kids first. So on the surface, it kind of looks like reciprocity. We gave the kid a balloon, but look what happened, right? Sales of food around the children's items and the adult items rose. But is that really reciprocity? Was it the kid that paid for everything? Right? Who got the gift? The kid did, but who paid for it? The parents. So what was going on there? Because that's not a straight up reciprocity. Well, that's where unity comes into play, right? Because when we identify ourselves with a unit or a category or a group, okay, a gift to the group is a gift to me, right? So, and normally it's not a you versus me situation. With unity, it's a we situation, it's an us. So it's not you are like me, that's liking. We have similarities. It's you are me, you are of me, meaning we're the same family. We're family.
Same tribe.
Same tribe,
Yeah. Yeah.
same culture, same religion, same geographical location, right? I live in the South in the US, right? Geography defines us sometimes. Sports teams can unite us in this category. Okay. So unity is all about the us, right? And your unit, so to speak. So if you can get people to identify with your unit, there's a lot of influence power there in doing so. Um, we've got social proof, which we talked about, which is basically the evidence of the masses. Like we look to the evidence of what others are doing or have done to show us what we need to do as well. Um, the authority principle I mentioned is that we've actually looked for credible, trustworthy experts to tell us what we should do. Because the truth is, we don't have time to be an expert in everything. So we need people with true expertise, right, that we can trust to guide us. So, for instance, if I have a plumber coming to my house and they tell me I need a toilet, I mean, I don't know anything about plumbing, so I guess I'm buying a toilet, right? So we need people like that to guide us in areas that we're just not experts in, so to speak. You got consistency, which is to me one of the most powerful principles. But by definition, that means that if somebody makes a commitment, if they take a stand on an issue, put effort into it, what have you, there's a lot of external and internal influence on them to follow through and be consistent and do what they said they were going to do, right? To be consistent in their thoughts, actions, and beliefs. And we know this to be true if you think about the opposite of this word. What do we call people who are inconsistent in what they do or what they say in their thoughts, actions, and beliefs? So who don't routinely do what they say they're going to do. We don't have any positive words in the English language to describe these people, liars being a big one. So, you don't want others to view you as being inconsistent in your thoughts, actions, and beliefs. That's your kind of external influence. And then at the same time, you don't want you don't want to view yourself in that light. So that's your internal influence. So it's actually getting you from two different sides. From the outside, I don't want others to think I'm lying. And on the inside, I don't want to think of myself as a liar, right? We want to be consistent in our thoughts, actions, and beliefs. So if people commit, they do. That's what you can take away from consistency. And of course, scarcity, most people have heard of. Scarcity is really about you being unique, what makes you different than everybody else, the scarce resource. But when it comes to resources, true scarcity is about when it becomes limited. If a resource is about to run out or dwindling, man, that uber motivates you to want that thing more and do more to get it, even if you didn't want it to start with. Okay. And of course, if add some competition to the mix and it just amplifies that scarcity principle. A lot of people have heard of FOMO, right? Fear of missing out. That's scarcity. So instinctively, our brain naturally turns into what we stand to lose over and above what we stand to gain. Okay. So we really care more about what we're going to lose than what we stand to gain in a given situation, which is kind of interesting because in dental school, we were taught when it comes to patient communication, promote the benefits, promote the benefits, promote the benefits of this feature, this product, this service. But what actually gets more people to move? The consequences of not doing these things, right? And what you stand to lose by not moving forward. Doesn't mean the benefits don't have an impact, but believe it or not, the consequences or potential loss that you stand by doing nothing actually motivates more, which is kind of crazy. So that's kind of them as a high level breakdown.
I mean, it all makes sense, especially the last one, as I said, that people are more driven, the stick is more potent than the carrot, so to speak. We're more driven by fear than we are positive emotions in the short term, because from an evolutionary standpoint, we don't want to be eaten by the tiger, basically.
Yeah, well, I mean, think of it this way. Like, so here's the if the oxygen was running out of the room you're sitting in right now, wherever you're watching or listening to this from, most of you would probably want to know that before it happens, not when it happens. Because if you know before it happens, what's it going to motivate you to do? Let's get the heck out of here and go find some air, right? It's going to motivate you to act. So it's really this, you can't siphon the fear out of scarcity, right? It's this primal fear that if this thing runs out, it could be life or death. Okay.
Mm.
The challenge for us is our brain are, still stuck in this lizard mode, so to speak, where it can't discern true life or death resources running out to meaningless everyday things that we can just get more of if we're, you know, patient, right? So inconvenience, it still feels that same loss effect the same as if it's a life or death resource.
I love this. And again, to distill it back for any listeners here, I think a core point that I'd like to make here is, in an age where there's uncertainty, there's putting my marketing and business cap on here, instead of getting focused on technology and algorithms and so on, focus on what will always be consistent, and that is human behavior, which is again why it's an honor to have you here, Chris. Again, just going further on, I'd love to circle this back to how you actually apply this now for dental clinics, and how that how that is incorporated into that 4A framework we talked about before. And if you could explain that, that'd be really appreciated.
Yeah, same kind of thing, like trying to nail down. I mean, obviously, there's so many metrics and key point indicators, KPIs as they call them, uh, analytic reports you can look at for your practice. But there's this paradox of choice that exists, and the statement in the science basically states that the more things you have to focus on in a given moment, the more options put in front of you, so to speak, the less likely you are to focus or pick any of them. Because when there's too many things to focus on, to decide about, pick from, your brain loses the ability to differentiate between the options and the choices. And if it can't tell the difference between them in that moment, it thinks it's safer to do nothing, right? And not focus on them, right? To procrastinate. Because that's what your brain does when it doesn't think it has the capabilities in a moment, or it doesn't understand the root cause. It either ignores the problem or procrastinates on it. Neither of which are good for us long term. So we don't want that to happen. So the too many options, too many things is key. So again, in my own world, I had to try to figure out my own practices. How can I simplify this? Right? Maybe not, because what the studies show is that more than five things and you've lost somebody. That's it. Five is about the most things we can focus on or handle in any given moment. So I decided, all right, well, I'm going to do one better. Give me four. Give me four areas that I can nail down. What are the four biggest pain points when it comes to my own practices and practice growth? And the first one was the catalyst for growth in any business. It was the attraction phase. That's the first A, attraction. So how can I attract not only the right quantity of new patients, but quality new patients to reach my goals? Okay. So leveraging all of the different types of marketing and mediums that are out there. I mean, in essence, for me, I simplify it down to it's anything in marketing from a marketing medium, whether it's online marketing or, print medium, traditional medium, grassroots, direct mail kind of stuff, to internal marketing, grassroots marketing, network marketing, symbiotic marketing. I mean, you name it. There's all kinds of categories. But in essence, they run the spectrum of time and money. And it basically this whatever your budget is. So some things cost nothing of your time and just cost money. Like when we do marketing with companies like yourself, right? We just write a check and you do the marketing
Yeah,
for us. Good luck.
yeah.
Other things like grassroots marketing, which I like doing, doesn't really cost a lot of my money, but it takes up a lot of my time. So that's me going to retirement communities, let's say, and doing wine and cheese educational events to attract my target market to my practice, right? So little money, but takes up more time. So usually they all kind of fall into that extreme. But what can we do in all of those categories with our budget of time and money to hit that quantity and quality of new patients to reach our goal and attract them to our practice? But attracting them isn't enough. I mean, that's part of the challenge. The second A is attendance, right? So one of my big issues when I sold my two best ones and took over the two worst ones was not the advertisements, not bringing in opportunities, But, I was spending $36,000 a month. Okay, that's a month. Most people don't spend that in a year, right? But per month, and to get 60 new patients for my efforts. So 30 at one office and 30 at the other office every month. And you don't have to be a marketing whiz to realize that that is not a good check to write every month. Something is not working in that scenario. But my problem was I didn't know what. So that's why my first company that I built, my first dental support service company, so to speak, was a call tracking company because I knew the answer was on the telephone. I just didn't have the means to get the answer, right? So I had to create the means. And I had to hire people to listen to every one of my phone calls and provide me data on and a summary report on what was going on. And lo and behold, we did not answer 256 marketing-based new patient phone calls every month. Just ring, ring, ring. Nobody answers. They hang up, or it was a busy signal, or it went right to voicemail. Okay. 256 times I paid for the phone to ring and nobody could get it, despite having two people at each of my front desks at the time. So four people, and we can't answer the phone 254 times a month. The next thing was when they did answer, their conversion rate, they only made an appointment 24% of the time, when the national average at the time for a fee-for-service practice like ours was around 33%. And we can't even match that. We're at 24% with a 17% no-show rate. So automatically, I have an attendance problem, right? I got the leads, but the other side of the marketing coin, this lost opportunity was killing me. So I had to dive in and figure out, how do we answer more new patient phone calls? What are we doing? What barriers are getting put up that we can overcome to schedule more of these calls into appointments? And how do we influence people to show? It's going to be key. Because if we drop the ball in any of those three areas, it's going to cost us more in the attraction phase to make up for that inefficiency, right? Which is why I was spending so much money. So once we've tackled that, and now we've got them into the office, they've attended, now we need acceptance. That's the third A, acceptance. And this is where the persuasion principles were key in communicating how to frame and present the same treatment needs that the patient has, but present it in a way to influence them to want that treatment. Because, and we talked about this a little earlier, when it's a want, it's not about the money anymore. Okay. They want it. And if they want it, they'll move heaven and earth to figure out a way to get it done. Okay. So when you were talking about your tutoring and why you could charge 40 euros, it's because they wanted that. Yeah, they needed it, but they wanted it. The parents wanted it. Maybe the kids needed it, but the parents paying for it wanted it.
Yeah.
Okay. And they were like, hey, and you can take care of that. Here's your check. Go. So getting need to want is key, because most people, unless it's life or death, would prefer to spend money on what they want, not what they need. Okay. But we're in the needs presenting business most of the time. The only time need trumps want in our world is pain, right? When it's a pain situation, of course, they're motivated to get it fixed, so to speak. Okay. So we got to do something about that. But if we can, since most of the time it's non-pain, well, if we could present that in a way that this need becomes a want, now we got a chance to convert more. And we did. And so acceptance is key. That's where using persuasion and persuasion, get them in the right mindset and communicate things in the right way, leads to a whole lot of acceptance. And then, of course, the last A is, how do we keep them, right? We need to work on attrition is the last A. Because if I've spent all this money to market, to get them in the door, to influence them into treatment, but they don't come back, well, again, that's going to cost me 4 times as much money in marketing to replace an existing customer than if I just kept them. So what can we do to influence them to stay, right? To anchor them to our practice, so there's no other reason why they'd go anywhere else. So despite whatever your issues are, if you just dive in and look at your practice in those 4 areas and try to make progress to make improvements in those areas, one at a time, one for each A, totally up to you. But the more progress you make in those areas, the more success you're going to have.
I love that. And I think I've mentioned this before. This overlays beautifully upon a framework that we have at Clinic Success Partners for a clinic growth engine, which is, we call it just traffic, conversion, price, and churn. Yours is much more concise. It's the same principles here. And what I love about this is when you can distill everything down into those 4 components, be it the 4 A's or whatever you'd like to call it, there's always one constraint that will jump out. And as you said, what I always say is which you've mentioned as well, there's two ways you can double your return on ads. You can either spend twice as much money or double twice as many people that arrive on the page actually make that appointment. And there's obviously a hybrid approach here of you can use technology, which we do. But as I said, human psychology is evergreen and it's never going to change. What are some of your favorite strategies across those four A's, between persuasion, presuasion that you like to use to level up across all four A's?
Yeah, so good question. So I'd say definitely from the advertising standpoint, one of the ways you can create mindsets is with the images that you're using. Okay. Pictures. Pictures used to be worth 1,000,000 or 1,000 words. Now they're worth 1,000,000 words if they're backed with influence, right? So being very strategic about the pictures that are in your advertisements. So for instance, me posting pictures with my smiling, happy photos, right? And that was key. Oh, look, doc's having a great experience with that patient. It looks like they're having a great experience. They like him. Maybe I'm going to like him, right? Was a great persuasive tool. So I'm persuading them to let them know we're probably going to be friends before they come in. Or using images like, let's say I'm going to be doing a promotional thing for cosmetics. So clear aligner therapy to straighten their teeth, veneers, whitening, what have you. So starting that advertisement, let's say, with an image of the sun rising, right? Studies show that a sunrise creates an image of change in that person, and a mindset of change. What does a sunrise imply typically? Hey, a new day is dawning, right? New possibilities are on the horizon. The darkness we were living through is done because of this. So, dropping that on a time when people's mindset is in change, which is the first day of the week, the first day of the month, right? And the first day of the year. Those are powerful times to do any kind of advertisement built around getting somebody and influencing them to want to change their behavior, right? Their smile, those kind of things. So it's being specific and targeting when these things, they get exposed to the messaging and with the specific pictures and imagery in there, automatically is going to persuade them, okay, to be more receptive to what the content now says underneath those photos and things. As well as I said, layering in that social proof and authority evidence. So they see, hey, a mindset of change. Oh, look at all these reviews. Oh, so if I do want to change, these guys might be the ones. Oh, look at all this education, credentials, awards. Okay, maybe I'll be safe getting my change done there. These other ads I see all just list, they make it about themselves. Here's what we do. We provide this, we provide that. Whereas this office is talking about how they help me, right? Not what they do, how they help me and what my needs are. Which one might I choose now?
I love that. Leveraging the whole new year, new me, constantly here too often if you're ever trying to join a new gym, but in a way that suits your business.
Yeah, and that same mindset applies not only to the first of the year, as I said, but actually the first of each month and the first week of the first day of the week. The same mindset applies. So you can kind of still tap into that strategically if you understand the science behind it. For the acceptance or not acceptance, I would say the attendance. Here's another great thing. If you guys want to double your potential marketing ROI right now with one simple question you could ask your patients, do this. What if you, for every potential new patient you're on the phone call with and that you've just made an appointment for, right? Tomas and his crew have worked hard to get these leads. You closed them, you got them on the books. What if they ended it with, hey, before you go, is there anybody else we can make an appointment for? So tap into that unit, right? Because when you first called, it was a you versus me situation. Maybe you're going to like us, maybe you don't, maybe you make an appointment, maybe you don't. But now you've made an appointment, which means what? They're part of your dental family now, right? They're on your team, ideally. So let's reinforce that. And most people are so stuck in their own mindset when it comes to making appointments, they forget that there's other people they could actually make an appointment for. And unless you ask the question, it doesn't come top of mind. So if you end that call with, hey, before you go, is there anybody else we can make an appointment for? You'd be surprised about what happens. I mean, now, oh yeah, geez, duh, my husband, let me get him in there. Oh, you know what? I got the kids. Let me schedule them. There's 3 more new patients. Oh, you know what? I got my parents that live with me. Yeah, I probably should get them scheduled too. I'll bring them with me. Right. So one of my businesses is a dental call center, of course, called Golden Goose Scheduling. And my record for one of my agents at Golden Goose, because they all asked this question, is they scheduled 10 new patient appointments off of one phone call by asking that question. Okay. And all 10
Yeah.
showed, but that was crazy. So literally everybody and their grandmother lived with them. But that's an extreme example, but it just shows you what if you could get two for every potential new patient call or three?
Mm.
What does that do for you, the ROI that you've already spent?
And it also snowballs as well
It
because
does.
it's an iterative process. Those 10, you ask every single one of them, and all of a sudden, in an age where customer acquisition cost generally increases, the only way you can offset that is by having something that also grows exponentially. So referrals, obviously, it's incredibly powerful stuff. What are some other examples? I know you talk a lot about framing people beforehand. You've shown me examples before. I'd love to learn more.
Yeah, so on the acceptance side of things, the better you get at framing things as a this or that scenario, the more success you're going to have. And whatever this or that is, you want the thing you'd like them to say yes to be that, the second thing. So this wakes the brain up for that, right?
Mm,
This tells the brain, hey, stupid, you're not paying attention. Pay attention. Something important's coming. Oh, there's that. Okay. So instantly it puts more focus, positive or negative, right, on that second thing. So for instance, if I said, I've got good news and bad news. Now the bad news is this, but the good news is this.
mm,
Automatically, it makes the good news sound a whole lot better by starting with the bad news versus flipping it. Well, the good news is this, but the bad news is this. Oh, crap.
mm.
Makes the bad news sound really bad, right? So whatever comes first sets the stage for their perception of what comes next. So I want to present things always, you should always present things as a this or that if you can, meaning stop telling people they need crowns and fillings. Because when you tell somebody they need something, you've taken away their control.
Nobody likes to be pushed into anything.
Nobody likes to be pushed into anything. We learned as little children that we hate for people to tell us what to do. Okay. So, and take away that control. So, one of the ways you bring control back to the situation is by presenting it as a choice, this or that. So, instead of me saying, you need a crown, and that patient's going, who are you to tell me I need a crown? This is what they're thinking, right? It doesn't hurt right now. I'm in charge of me. I'll decide when I need this crown. Thank you very much. And they leave and they'll schedule. Versus if I said, all right, well, your first option, of course, is do nothing. Remember that consequence we talked about. But here's what's going to cost you decay. It's going to keep getting worse. It's going to get to the center of the tooth. It's going to kill it. It's going to cause an infection. So that's going to cause pain. Probably going to cost time off of work for multiple visits and around $3,600 in treatment down the road. Or we can avoid all that and do a crown, which is significantly less, right? Which
Mm.
would you prefer? You want to do nothing and have to do the root canal or extraction and all those other bad things later, or do the crown today? Choose.
I
So
love that.
automatic, right? If you're sitting in the chair, you're going, yeah, I don't want that to happen. All right, I guess I'm doing the crown.
Mm. What I love as well is that you also layered in. I mean, this is a it's not the technical term, but I've heard this being called from a sales standpoint. Uh, it's a famous lad, Alex Mosey, and he coined a similar concept. He called it the M&M technique. Now, for anyone listening, basically it was in reference to a scene in a movie with Eminem in it. And he was having this rap battle, okay, and he was insult. Generally, the way this would work is somebody would insult the other person, and then the other person would compete, and uh, they basically see who insults the other worse, and then that's how they dictate the winner. What happened in this movie, and it was called 8 Mile, Eminem listed off by listing every single possible flaw that the other person could say about him, just speaking himself poorly. And then he said, but here's where you are. And by the time the guy tried to make a counter argument, the ammunition had been taken out of the metaphorical gun. So I think they work very synergistically together. Effectively, what you're saying is these are the consequences. You may be considering doing nothing, and I get that. And but you're nearly handling the objections as to why it not make sense. And then, as you said, then you present them with better options. So it's very symbiotic, and I really, really think that's very powerful.
Yeah, well, and think of it this way, right? So we're educating our patients and trying to get them to make a decision, but ultimately we're asking them to make a decision as if they are oral healthcare experts, as if they understand their condition like we do. And the truth of the matter is, unless they've physically gone through that thing you're recommending, meaning if you're talking about an implant, they've had an implant before. If they haven't gone through it, then they honestly have no idea what they're getting into and what they're trying to choose. Okay. They can't decide at our level because they don't have our expertise and training and experience. But at the same time, so it's kind of crazy that we're asking them to make that decision. Number one, because they don't get it. Number two, the real fact is because of our training and expertise, if they really knew what we knew was going to happen to them and that it was going to cost them more time, money, and pain and resources because they waited, most reasonable people would want to avoid that and not let that happen. Right. So that simple fact is true. So where's the disconnect? Why are so many people going without treatment? Because we are horrible at presenting those consequences to them. Right. We
I love
hide
that.
that, bury it, when in fact we need to start with it.
I love that. Also, I want to be respectful of your time. I'm conscious we've only a few minutes. But before we wrap things up, is there any other, I suppose, one extremely actionable bit of advice? I mean, I love the referral point, just last second, you know, leveraging that unity principle of persuasion and presuasion. Is there any hyper actionable bit of advice that a clinic owner of some sort, be it dental, med spa, chiro, so on, could implement today to help raise themselves up in one of those four A areas that you mentioned?
Yeah, let's see. Is there like one ring that unites them all?
Get ice them all.
Yeah. I think it's been the probably using the consistency principle. I always go back to, questions create commitments, right? So you can use questions persuasively to create commitments. Uh, Asking questions in that moment creates commitments in that moment and creates mindsets as well. So I guess I would say this, right? When we normally present things to patients, pros and cons of treatment, whatever, we're guessing what they value. Okay.
Mm.
We're assuming that they value those things. When in fact, the old acronym or the old adage about when you assume, okay, it's not good. We're usually wrong in that scenario. So my whole thing is we could leverage this consistency principle before they get to us in a persuasive way, in an ad, on the phone, in the reception area, in a new patient questionnaire, and then leverage it in that moment by asking those same questions. Let's just find out what they value, get them committed to what they value, create a mindset about what they value about their mouth, and then let's tie the treatment pros and cons back to that. Right? How powerful would that be? Well, I can tell you, right? There's the only way we were able to do $1 million of growth in each practice 2 straight years in a row in a terrible economy is because number one, I got the new patient thing figured out. We kept pumping people in. We went from 60 a month to averaging over 300 fee-for-service patients a month. But at the same time, if they didn't say yes to treatment, it would have been a wasted expense. So getting better commitments from these people at every stage of the process, from the advertisement to the phone, at the chair to when we presented, was instrumental. So learn how to get better commitments, right? Because when people commit, they do.
Foot in the door. Love it. Uh, Listen, we'll leave things there, Chris. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I definitely would love to do this again. I think I have to go a hard cut off after this, but again, it's been an absolute pleasure. I personally learned a lot. I know for a fact I am going to be taking this transcript and creating as many action items so for my own clients as I can. And I would strongly recommend anybody that's listened to this do something very similar. Uh, that being said, where can people find you most easily?
Yeah, check us out at cialdini.com. So Cialdini, cialdini.com. We have tons of online training resources. So everybody can begin their training and start walking the path of influence today.
Love it. We'll see you soon.
Okay.
Cheers. Thanks, Chris.